power filters, power regenerators? Is it snake oil? Is it real? Does it actually do something to your system? Do you have to spend $5,000? These are all very interesting questions, and I've never had a standalone high-end power regenerator before. I've always had the little strip filters from Emotiva, or whatever the ones they got, the this little series of resistors and filters, and they kind of run the electricity through, and then it's a series of plugs. It just looks kind of like an overgrown power strip, if you will. And if you open it up, you can see capacitors and things like that kind of doing some work in there and kind of trying to, or attempt to, filter the AC power that's coming in through them, so that you maybe in some ways see a cleaner signal to your gear. And I have heard those make a small difference, and they're pretty cheap. You can get them for anywhere from $800 or $80 to $1,500, $2,000, depending on where you kind of want to spend and live. But some of us in our Discord have been talking about these power regenerators, where you actually take the incoming AC current, and then you basically convert that to DC, then back to AC, in like a perfect clean, electrical power availability to your gear. And so you have this box sitting next to your rack, or in your rack, that all of your gear plugs into. I'm really not interested in spending like $5,000 for one of these things, especially the high-end ones. But if you've got a really nice system, I guarantee you they're going to make a big difference. But what I found recently was I found a PS-Audio one. I think it's the old MultiWave 2. I think they came out about like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And they were like $2,000 or $3,000 back then for this power regenerator. And I want to share my experience with you, because I picked this thing up for like $400, and it worked. But when I got it home, I noticed the faceplate was kind of skewed a little bit, and so I kind of took it apart to try to kind of cosmetically repair some of these things. And once I took it apart, I noticed that all of the 25-year-old capacitors had kind of drained out, and there was kind of a evidence of fluid in the bottom of the chassis. And I thought, shit, did I just get like bunked on this thing or what? And so I thought, you know what, man, I build these crossovers for the open baffle speakers. I get in this DIY space. I talk a big game. And I actually reached out to a local shop, because I was thinking, well, I'll just send it in, if I can spend a few $100 and get this thing tuned up. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. So I'm going to share with you guys today on my experience and my results in implementing a pretty high-end, about as high-end as you can get, power regenerator into my system, what it did for me. I'll walk you through kind of the process of my purchase, the steps that I took to kind of rebuild this thing, hopefully dispelling some anxiousness on your part about wanting to buy some of this kind of used high-end gear at lower prices, especially older stuff, and be able to crack it open and kind of put new capacitors and stuff in. It was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I just had to take my time and take a lot of pictures. So let's jump into this thing. I'm going to show you guys what I got and tell you all about it, and it is so worth it, and I'm so happy that I did. Let's jump over to scene 2. All right, so here we are, scene 2. I'm going to run you guys through a little bit of what I did. But first off, I saw this on Facebook Marketplace, and I was like, holy crap, I'm super excited. We've been wanting to try one of these in our community for a long time. Not many people have a regenerator. Like I said, this is the original, not the OG, but this is the MultiWave 2. I think it came out in the early 2000s at some point, and I believe they were $2,200 to $2,500 or something like that, brand new. So you can imagine on today's market, I mean, you'd probably have to be looking at something, $4, $5, $6 grand, 25 years of inflation or whatever. But the technology hasn't changed. I mean, we're converting AC to DC and back again. Probably a little bit more bells and whistles. So anyway, I saw this for sale. I went and picked the damn thing up, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I mean, just look at this. Look at the craftsmanship in this thing. This thing is massive. It took both of us to carry it out of his house and put it in the car. But essentially, it's the P600 power plant. Again, all made in the USA. This thing is absolutely built like a freaking tank. It's going to last forever. Here I got it home, and if you can notice here, there's a little bit of misalignment here. The gap is taller over here than it was, over here. So what had happened is, and you can't see the 3 fins. There's 3 more fins on this side right here. Somebody actually dropped it at one point, and it landed on the bottom corner and bent all these fins in. So you can see the back fins were bent back here. The faceplate was just all misaligned. Everything didn't look good. So we said, all right, first thing I was going to do, because when I went to his house, it worked perfectly. So first thing I was going to do is you can see the scratches and stuff here, is I'm going to rip this thing apart and fix the face. So we took the top off. Just be careful if these have been plugged in that you let a ton of time go for all these capacitors and everything to drain. You could get electrocuted. I'm no electrician. I'm just a hobbyist. I just dive into this crazy stuff. I have no training, so don't take what I say with anything other than me just sharing my experience. So we took the lid off because we were going to take this faceplate apart. And first thing I noticed is all this residue, this oil type liquid over here. You can see it down here as well. And I thought, oh dear, what do we got? These capacitors. Nothing else is really generating a bunch of heat. So really the only consumable, the things that as well as these things are built, the only thing that's going to go really bad is these capacitors here. They just dry out, they expand, they contract, they get leaks, they start to drain all of their fluid out, and then pretty soon they just don't work as well as they should. So although we did audition it at his house, and it was functioning, it probably wasn't running at its full capacity or potential. So we ran into that, and I thought, oh, darn it. Well, maybe I'm just screwed because, I mean, look, I have no idea what I'm looking at here. Like I said, I reached out to a local shop. It would have been like, 3-4 hours at $200 an hour to do this thing, and I'm thinking, man, it's just scrap metal now. And but look at that transformer in there, dude. Straight mercury magnet, made in California, USA. That thing is beast. I mean, I'm not huge, but I'm 6 foot 220. I got decent hands, ironworker hands. Been in construction my whole life. That is a big ass transformer. Anyway, so what we needed to do, I figured, screw this. I'm gonna fix the damn thing. This thing, as I got to look at it, I was like, look, this is super simple. I've got a board here. We've got a face board here. There was another little board plugged into this guy right here. So I took a lot of pictures and I said, look, I know how to solder. I can do this stuff. Let's just research it. So I took a ton of photos. I started unplugging these connectors, trying to keep everything orientated as much as possible. Again, using your voltmeter, make sure don't have any, stored current in here and you're going to get all jacked up. And I started talking to people on our Discord and they were super helpful. So this is what we needed to do. We needed to take these sideboards off so that we could get to the back side and unsolder these capacitors and put new ones in. And I ordered new caps. I'll show you guys. I'll put the links to the capacitors in there if you're interested in seeing them. But unless you have one of these, it might not be interesting to you. Here's the other side. So this was my next dilemma. In order to take this thing apart, I had to figure out a way to get this transformer out of here, and you can see the bolts are way down there, and so it was a big pain in the butt. But we just took it one bite at a time. Yeah, there's that transformer, and that thing's insane. So we took a bunch of photos. Take photos from all angles if you're going to do stuff like this in your gear. So we took a bunch of photos. We went through this whole thing. We checked all the components. Everything looked really good, other than those main capacitors leaking. So just make sure you're kind of, everything and where it's all kind of going. We cleaned it up a little bit. So there it is. We took all the boards out. We took the faceplate off. You can see the faceplate sitting back there. We're getting ready to rock and roll into this thing. My first mission, so you can see that faceplate. Look how jacked up that thing was. There was like sheared off screws and stuff down here. So we got to start to taking that thing apart. So there it is. You can see it was just 2 screws on the bottom, and then everything else was these kind of barrel sleeve pins. So it was all just kind of pressure pins. So we took the faceplate apart. We got the screw out. The screw was actually stuck in here. We were able to get the screw out and went to the hardware store and got a couple new screws for the bottom. We pinned everything back together. There's kind of the unit right there. You can see we got the main boards out. We're getting ready to pull those side ones. And here's we got it all put back together. So you can see here we're all realigned. I mean, it's an old unit. There's a little bit of dings and stuff on it, but for the most part, we rebuilt that faceplate. We got it all dialed back in. Looking good, ready to rock and roll. Look at this. We cleaned and straightened all these fins here. We got them things all looking back. So now that we got that thing cosmetically looking good again, we're going to jump into removing these sideboards here and getting the capacitors off. So what we did, simple thing. You gotta kind of decipher this stuff, right? So you can see these resistors up here. Obviously, they've got this plate that's holding them in. So we had to remove that first. So we removed the top and bottom ones. You can see we've got the screws holding the board on, and there was 4 screws there. So remove the clamps there, the pieces of aluminum. I don't know exactly what they're called. They're part of that heat sink or whatever to dissipate the heat and stuff. So we removed those. which was pretty simple. It was just a matter of taking these nuts off of here. The bolts were actually inserted into the aluminum, so that was pretty simple. You can see we've got all of the different boards off. Everything's cleared out. We went through and cleaned everything up. We checked all of these solder joints on everything on the back side. You guys can kind of look at that. You know, and if you see any that are kind of funky looking, you know, just hit them with your soldering iron a little bit and just kind of reset, reflow that solder. Not a big deal. You know, if you need some practice stuff for soldering, it's all over the internet. You can get them. So here's where the capacitors, when I got these things, I actually flipped the capacitor and they were so dry it sounded like a walnut was rolling around inside there. So that's how you could kind of tell they were toast. Probably weren't doing their job. There's a little bit of swelling on the dome. Here you can see, you know, simple tools. I mean, there's nothing really fancy. When you get into this super high-end stuff, it's literally built with nuts and bolts. You're going to be using wrenches and pliers and hammers and, you know, sockets. And, you know, there's no plastic connectors or, you know, cheap stuff in this type of product. Another thing we needed to do is figure out what capacitor we needed. So we knew they were 3,300 microfarads, 100 volts. So we just took some measurements of these things to make sure that we were getting the right sizes. Again, I posted this in our Discord and they helped me kind of work through and we ordered new capacitors. So here we've got the PCB board off. Here's the resistors. You can see the original kind of barrier that they had on here with some thermal paste. We actually went to a, I think it was not neoprene. I can't remember the material. I'll post the links to them in here. But you can see you've got a little bit of, these things have been worked. These solder joints, you can see they're kind of heat affected here. You can see that this is the main part of this thing that's working. All the other stuff look really good. These were actually a couple clips on the other side. I'll show you guys. A couple of these had kind of had cold joints, so we reflowed the solder there on some of those and kind of redid those clips. There's another one of those clips. You can see there's a couple of them on there. So we peel all this stuff, get this stuff cleaned up. Some of the paste remained on the sides there, so I would leave that. We left that there because then when we got the new thermal barrier little pieces, we just put those on there and the paste actually held it. You can get some that are kind of sticky on one side or, you know, whatever. The ones that we bought weren't, but we used that thermal paste, that residue, to actually just stick and adhere those on, so that was really, really handy. So think about stuff like that before you just go wild and clean stuff up. I mean, you could have cleaned it all the way up, and but I figured, hey man, that thermal paste was in there for a reason. I might as well just leave it. And here we got actually the transformer. We ended up removing 3 of the screws and leaving 1 in, or the bolts, and we were able to just rotate this guy out of the way so that we could get that other board off that I was talking about, because it was kind of locked in. I didn't want to have to take this thing all the way out because those bolts down there were a pain in the butt already. So we were able to just get enough room to get in there and swing that out. Taking the measurements of the resistors there to make sure that we get the right you know, parts to go back in. Obviously measuring the distance between your pins, depending on, you know, you want to make sure that you, when you're buying your capacitors, you buy the right ones that have the right values and the right spacing and dimensioning, so you don't waste your time. So make sure you take a bunch of measurements. Here we can see this is the board taken out. We've got everything cleaned up. We're ready. You can see the old solder in there. You can see the old capacitors. We've got everything taken apart. We're ready to kind of start pulling this thing apart. So all we do is basically just kind of, I like my soldering iron nice and hot. So I just take my soldering iron, take the tip, and we just kind of loosen up this back one first as I'm pulling the bottom of the capacitor to me with a finger. So once this kind of gets liquid, it'll just pull right out because you're leveraging the capacitor towards you, and then you let it cool, and then you wet this one out and push the capacitor back the other way, and it'll pivot right out of there, and you can just repeat that sequence, and you can get all your old nasty 25-year-old capacitors that are bone dry out of there, and you're rocking and rolling. Here's the new ones we got. We spent a little bit of money. We spent a couple $100 on capacitors, you know, to make sure we got a good quality. We got the same type pin and spacing. The dimensions lined right up. We took the boards. We heated everything up and we cleaned up the holes. So I just used a little teeny drill bit that was the right size, and I would heat the solder up, and then I would just run the drill bit through there by hand, not even using a drill motor or anything, and it was the exact size. So it was just to kind of get that solder cleaned up. They have like solder suckers and some different tools that you can use. I didn't have any of that stuff. I just went in and did it all manual by hand with just, you know, a little heat and a little drill bit. Again, I like to run my things hot, man. I'm running 750, 800 degrees. It just happens quick, you know, less buildup in heat in your components and stuff like that. This is the Yeehaw, the one I use, the 930 9D Plus. This is a great soldering iron. And then you just put your capacitors back in. I just put them all back in the holes, and then I flip the thing upside down, and the board and everything kind of supported itself. And I just soldered those guys back in. So there you can see that we got the brand new capacitors in there. They're all ready to rock and roll. Here we got them all soldered back in. You can see nice clean solder now. You know, just take your time. If you're running nice hot heat, you literally just hit it for a couple seconds on either side, flood some new solder down in there, and watch it just kind of wick and suck in. And then you'll actually see the post of the capacitor actually poke through rather than being kind of mounded over. And that's kind of when you know that that thing sucked down and you actually, you know, welded or soldered that thing to the board. So you want to watch out for that. If you just have a mound of solder up here, you probably haven't wetted it in enough, and you need maybe a little bit more heat or a little bit more time. But you can see these guys, you can see it just start to poke through on all of them. So that's what you're looking for. When you got this kind of thing out, make sure you're checking these solder joints here, wiggle everything around. You might as well check everything while you're there. Don't waste your time and have to go back. And then just remount everything. Here you can see the new thermal barriers we put on. I can't remember the name of the material. I'm totally blanking it right now. But we just stuck those little, they come in pre-cut tabs and everything. You can get it in the sheet and then just cut the size you want. That's another option too. But we got all new thermal barriers on there. We got the new capacitors in, and boom, here we are. We've got this thing rocking and rolling. And it is just an absolutely fantastic machine. We actually run a single power cord to this. We plug everything in the system here. It is a P600, so it's built to kind of handle all of your components. So we're running the PS-Audio gain cell phono preamplifier. We're running the PS-Audio DirectStream Mark II. Of course, the Dolce Audio single-ended triode amplifier and a pentode amplifier, excuse me. And the new MultiWave, and of course the Baffles, but absolutely glorious. We got the thing done, and there it is, super cool. Let's jump back over to scene one, and we'll kind of talk about my final thoughts and get y'all out of here. All right, hey, I hope you enjoyed that kind of run through. You know, after all of that, putting this thing into my system, I'm going to tell you guys, listening to it before and after the repairs, that was an intense difference. I mean, before it was, you know, it sounded good. It made a change. You know, I would put it more on the level of a, you know, putting a good cable in, or getting a nice, you know, filter or something, some of the AC filters that I've used in the past, you know, just maybe a little bit quieter background and stuff. One of the things that I noticed right off the rip after the full capacitor repair, bringing this all thing, you know, cleaning it up, making everything nice, checking all the solder joints, going through it, immediately a massive quieter background, like to the point that it was like on my analog system, usually if you crank it up, you know, because on an analog vinyl section, you're usually dealing with like 100 dB a gain. So if you really crank your system up and get right up to the tweeter without anything playing, you can kind of hear that hum. Not really audible from your listening position if you have a good system. If you've got kind of a crappy analog system and you can hear that hum, you know, from the listening position, there's probably some issue there. But with putting the MultiWave into the system, that immediately cut by like 90%. Like I could crank my system all like max volume and put my ear on the tweeter and barely hear anything, just a little teeny hiss kind of left. So immediately got rid of all of that. Much quieter. It felt like I moved into this space where I got more dynamic range. Like it almost made the whole thing feel like less compressed. I don't know even how to explain it. Another thing that I noticed right off the rip was the bass. The bass was much more natural, defined, and clean. There was much more kind of a naturalness to the timbre and the tone. I felt like things sounded and felt a little bit more dynamic. A lot of that probably just due to the lack of noise and kind of making that darker background. One thing that we know from reducing noise or eliminating noise in the Shane is you get, you know, more clarity, more focus, more detail, you know, a better definition with that layering. Like everything just becomes like, clean the window a little bit, you know, which allows a lot of those little micro details and stuff to come through and actually be perceived by the ear rather than kind of being canceled out by the noise that's in your system. So to me, I don't know if I would go spend $6,000 or $7,000 on a brand new regenerator, because some of those get pretty expensive. But if you can find a used one like this, and you know, maybe you get lucky and your capacitors haven't leaked like the one that I had. But I'm literally $400 in for the used unit, $160 in new capacitors, and about 5 or 6 hours in time. And I learned a ton. I had a great time with our community, working through the build together and sharing with everybody and getting feedback from them. If you're nervous about this type of stuff, go get yourself a cheap AVR or something from you know, Goodwill for $30 and tear that thing apart. Break out your soldering iron. Get the one that I got. It's really good. It's only $50. And take an old board and just pull every capacitor resistor possible. Burn some shit up. Make some mistakes. You know, solder the stuff back in and just get some practice. And don't be afraid to jump into these kind of products and actually learn something. At the end of the day, $400. It was you know, kind of a bunk buy. You know, I probably, it wouldn't have lasted long, or if it was, it probably wouldn't have made much difference for you know, any period of time with those capacitors being dry like that. So I didn't have anything to lose at the end of the day. So at a minimum, I go in, I do the thing, it doesn't work out, it doesn't fix it. Maybe I messed something up. I'd have been out my $400 anyway. But now I've actually learned something and kind of gained a skill and something that I can actually use in the future. So anyway, James here, your AVX audio file. I hope you appreciated that review. Don't be afraid to look on the used market, man. You can get a ton of bang for buck there. And if you did not know, we're the world's only nonprofit charity reviewers. 100% of our proceeds, well, actually like 98% of our proceeds, we got to pay for the website and some, you know, editing software and stuff. Go to youth musical programs focused on mentorship through musical creation, helping our kids create music and get out of trouble by getting some mentorship and help in that space. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Later.